Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and tackle that one major decision you've been agonizing over. You know the exact one I'm talking about. It's just sitting there in the back of your mind right now, taking up all this precious mental real estate. And no matter how much you turn it over, no matter how many times you replay the options, you just can't seem to make the call.
Maybe it's a massive career pivot you're terrified to make. Or, maybe it's a really tough conversation you know you need to have with a partner or a colleague. Or honestly, maybe it's even just agonizing over what to text back to that one email. And yet, here you are, 3 weeks, 3 months, maybe even longer, running the exact same scenarios in your head, imagining the exact same potential disasters, and arriving at the absolute exact same frustrating uncertainty you started with.
Now, here is the absolute biggest trap of overthinking: the illusion that this endless looping is actually productive preparation. Seriously, this is what nobody tells you about being stuck in analysis mode. It feels like you're doing the work. It feels incredibly responsible and thorough to look at every single angle, to map out every possible contingency. But there's a very fine line that most of us cross without even noticing. It's the line where thinking stops being a useful tool for problem solving and just becomes a highly sophisticated way of staying completely still. Let's get into Chapter 1, the certainty illusion: why the right answer doesn't exist. We need to start by dismantling the core belief that drives this entire analysis loop: the dangerous idea that if we just gather enough information, absolute certainty will eventually arrive. Well, spoiler alert, that belief is entirely wrong. And the reason why is pretty profound. Most of the complex decisions you agonize over, they're simply not math problems. They do not have a hidden, objectively correct answer sitting at the back of the textbook just waiting to be discovered. Instead, they have outcomes. They represent possible futures. And every single one of those futures comes with unavoidable trade-offs. No amount of late-night pacing or pro-and-con lists will eliminate those trade-offs, because the uncertainty is structural. It's literally built into the situation itself.
Actually, psychologists have a specific term for this. It's called intolerance of uncertainty. Think of it as that massive psychological gap between the absolute guarantee you're desperately searching for and the messy, limited certainty that actually exists in the real world. Research consistently shows this is the primary driver of chronic overthinking. You aren't overthinking because the thinking is actually working or revealing new truths. No, you're overthinking because hitting the brakes and finally making a choice feels physically dangerous when you don't have a guaranteed outcome.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, the true cost of stillness: what happens when you wait. Let's look at how this builds into real, tangible damage to your life, your opportunities, and your daily energy levels. Because doing nothing, it absolutely has a price tag. I want you to sit with this question for a moment. What happens while you spin? While you've been stuck in this loop, running those identical thoughts on repeat, you might think the world is on pause, waiting for you to figure it out. But it's not. Something else has been happening quietly in the background. We really have to confront the hidden costs of waiting. First off, that window of time where the decision was actually easy to make, it's actively shrinking. The energy you could have poured into taking action has been completely drained by all that mental rehearsal. And worst of all, the fear is quietly growing. Why? Well, because every single day you don't decide, your brain logs that unresolved situation as a lingering threat. Overthinking doesn't just delay your decisions, it actively makes them harder. It adds weeks of artificial anxiety and mental weight to a choice that originally wasn't even that heavy. And this is exactly why deciding imperfectly is fundamentally less costly than continuing to not decide at all. Just look at the reality of a mediocre choice. You make it, you act on it, and boom, immediately you get real feedback. You move forward, you learn something concrete that you can actually use. But that perfect choice you're waiting for, it only lives in your head. It teaches you absolutely nothing, and it costs you precious time and energy while you wait for it to magically materialize. Moving on to Chapter 3, a misfiring survival instinct: why your brain defaults to delay. So, if overthinking makes things so much worse, we really need to understand why our incredibly advanced human brains are hardwired to do it so reliably in the first place. The answer actually traces back to human evolution. Think about our ancestors in high-stakes, low-margin environments. A wrong decision back then didn't mean, a slightly awkward meeting or a failed marketing launch. It meant real, physical harm. Careful deliberation kept people alive. Your nervous system literally evolved to treat unresolved danger signals as massive problems that required you to sit, turn the problem over, and process everything before taking a single step. And this brings us to a massively important reframe. Your brain simply doesn't distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and a risky career pivot. It treats all unresolved uncertainty the exact same way. It demands you stay in analysis mode, which means your overthinking is not a personality flaw. You aren't weak-willed or uniquely indecisive. You're simply experiencing a highly effective survival mechanism that's being applied to the completely wrong modern context. It's kind of like a smoke detector screaming because you made toast. You aren't fighting yourself. You're just dealing with a misfiring alarm system. Let's look at Chapter 4, Trusting the Adaptive Unconscious, and dive into Timothy Wilson's counterintuitive research. The crucial point here is found in the incredible decades-long research by University of Virginia psychologist Timothy Wilson. His work completely changes how we should approach complex choices. He ran this striking study where participants evaluated different products. One group was given plenty of time to sit, think carefully, and consciously analyze their options. The other group was intentionally distracted with a cognitive task, so they couldn't consciously deliberate at all. When both groups finally made their choice, the results were incredibly counterintuitive. The distracted group, the ones who couldn't overthink, actually reported significantly higher satisfaction with their decisions. Crazy, right? Well, here is the fascinating science behind why that happens. Conscious deliberation is fantastic for decisions with just a few, very clearly defined variables. But real-world decisions, the sticky, complicated ones you're stuck on, have far more variables than your conscious mind can effectively hold at once. That is where Wilson's concept of the adaptive unconscious comes in. Your unconscious is already processing those variables in the background. Your gut is doing the real heavy lifting. Past a certain point, more conscious thinking isn't adding wisdom. It's just generating noise that overrides the analysis your gut has actually already completed. All right, Chapter 5, How to Break the Loop. Let's get into the playbook for action. Now that we deeply understand the science and the psychology keeping us stuck, let's look at the exact tactical steps required to finally break out of this cycle and start moving. First, we have to change the primary question we're asking ourselves. Most people paralyzed by a decision are obsessively asking, what is the right choice? I want you to shift your perspective entirely. The infinitely more useful question is, what is the cost of not choosing? Because a lot of our paralysis is really just the fear of accountability, the fear of having to own a choice that didn't pan out perfectly. You have to deeply remember this reality. Not deciding is a decision. Staying in the loop is an active choice, and it comes with severe consequences. That golden opportunity you're circling, it won't wait for you indefinitely. That difficult conversation, it's certainly not going to get easier with time. The indefinite delay, not the potential mistake, is the real enemy of your growth here. So, here is your practical playbook to break the loop. Step 1. Set a firm deadline, not a vague intention, an exact date and time. Research proves that deadlines force your brain to perform differently, producing equal or better decisions in a fraction of the time. Step 2. Identify only the strictly required information that would genuinely change your answer. Step 3. Ask your future self, the decisive version of you that actually takes action, what they would do. And Step 4. You must accept fallibility. Now, that fourth step, it's absolutely vital. Accepting fallibility is not pessimism. It is the absolute foundational precondition for taking any action whatsoever. If you demand to be 100% right before you make a move, well, you're never going to move. The willingness to be wrong occasionally isn't a weakness. It's the very defining characteristic that makes decisive people decisive. And this leads us to a truth you need to fully internalize. Imperfect action beats perfect inaction every single time. It's not because getting things wrong doesn't matter, but because taking a step, taking a loss when it inevitably comes, adjusting your trajectory, and moving again, that is the only way any genuinely good outcome in your life has ever been built. I want to leave you with a final thought today to protect yourself against the worst kind of regret. It's not the regret of a bad choice. It's the regret of the paths you circled indefinitely and never took. The version of your life that never became real simply because you never stepped out of the loop. So cut through the noise. Set your deadline, make the call. What path are you abandoning right now by waiting for a certainty that is never going to arrive?